right, let's talk about pressing. Okay, one of the 6 essential movements is the press. This is a refilming. If you hadn't noticed, everything's different. Because I didn't turn my camera on. All right. There are going to be lots of different ways that you can press your BAMF hammer. Some of them are going to be conventional. Some of them are really unconventional, like, a butts up press where you're pressing, the hammer from the flat. We can do a lot of different things. But in the 6 essential movements, I want you to learn something very specific. If you've got experience in the bodybuilding space, you're going to be used to an Arnold press. This is going to be pretty close to that variation. Arnold press, we're thinking dumbbells, and we're coming into the front, we're squeezing, and then we're rolling out and pressing up. With your BAMF hammer, and hopefully this is, this makes sense, we're going to be thinking about angles, all right? And this is a skill that is going to be useful as you continue to go down your path with this piece of training equipment, not only thinking about what you were doing in a moment, but how the orientation of the hammer orients to the body, how that orientation moves forward into the movement that's happening next. All of that comes into play. So use yardstick here. If I just hold, okay, across my fist, I've got, some sort of lever here. If I bring my elbow and tuck it into my rib cage, all right, and I keep this hand the same, neutral, I end up with a 45-degree angle with the handle here, all right? What we're going to do is we're going to establish this angle as necessary in the starting position and the ending position. The difference being when I go up to the top, that hand, and obviously with a straight arm, just keeping it in frame, that angle is also going to be at 45 degrees, but it's going to be pointing in the opposite direction. So close to the body, I'm going to be here, pointing across. On the top, I'm going to be pointing away. So in this diagram, this is what we're looking at. We got a 45-degree angle. We've got the elbow pulled in nice and tight to the side, which means your lat is engaged and your rib cage is stacked. You can't do any of that stuff without a good front support position. And then we're going to press overhead, getting the biceps as close to the ear as possible without sending the head chasing the arm. And we're looking for a 45-degree angle out across the body. So you see we're dealing with 180 degrees of rotation, but the angle of the handle is going to stay the same. One of the important things that we're going to say here is I need you to keep a gap between the head of the hammer and your hand. Okay, we're going to keep that gap. The reason being, I want this to be as challenging on your grip as possible. All right, and on my hands, you probably can't see it, but I've got little hammer bites on both of my knuckles here from learning this lesson. Okay, because the hammer rubs and it'll rub the skin away. So we're going to make this necessary. A finger's width is fine, but as you increase the intensity of this movement, you can keep the reps the same, keep the rest the same, and just move your hand an inch farther away from the hammer, the head, and the rate of perceived exertion is going to go up. So we can easily manipulate this one. With the press, we're going to talk about a couple of different variations, and we're going to use numerics to show you which variation of the press that we're going to be looking at. 2-to-2 press is going to mean I'm starting in the bottom position with 2 hands, and I'm ending in the top position with 2 hands. When I go to that top position and add my second hand, this arm that is not drawn is going to add itself to this face of the hammer and help support the position, because that's really one of the places where you're going to find the most or rather the least capability, is maintaining that upright position with the 45-degree angle. The key to it is squeeze your last 2 fingers as hard as you can. If you're not trying to put the fingerprint of your pinky finger into the handle of the hammer, we're probably leaving some strength on the table. I will demonstrate the 2-to-2 press. I'll also demonstrate 2-to-1 presses, meaning we got 2 hands at the bottom, 1 hand on top. If you've got experience with Olympic lifting, this is going to be really beneficial, because with that second hand, we can pin to the hip bone, dip, and drive. So we're using the other hand as a shelf. I'm not pushing. I'm just trying to make a shelf from which I can transfer the dip and drive of the leg into the hammer to get it up into the top position. We'll go 1-and-1 presses. We'll also talk about 2-and-2 presses with a negative descent. So 2 hands at the bottom, 2 hands on top, and then you take that support hand off, hold position, and slowly return. I know there's a lot of information. It's going to be really useful to go through the demonstrations, which I've got for you, and those are going to happen now.
All right, I'm going to be doing a 2-and-2 push press here. So as we're talking about pressing, the numbers that are involved indicate either the number of hands in the beginning, on the hammer in the beginning of the movement, or the number of hands on the hammer at the turn in the movement, meaning the point where the concentric side of things stops and the eccentric side of things starts. If you don't know what concentric and eccentric means, don't worry about it. That's for something later on than your first 12 weeks of the BAMF hammer. Okay. So notice the broad face of the hammer is towards my body. That's because I want the broad face towards my body in the high position. I'm going to step over. This is how I always grab a hammer for a press. It just means the hammer starts in the correct position. So I'm going to stand this up. As I flip the weight over, notice my second hand adds itself to the pommel. Now, what I'm going to do with that hand is I'm going to attach my wrist to my hip, and I like to open my hand up because it prevents me from cheating. I notice that if I close my hand around the pommel, I have a tendency to push the hammer up in the air. We're going to do that push with our lower body rather than our upper body, so I don't want to be tempted. What I'm going to do here is dip. Okay, now, if you've got experience with Olympic lifting, this is the same type of dip that you would see with a push press or the beginning of a jerk. All right, so it's just going to be a slight break in the knees. I'm over-exaggerating it a little bit here. And then we're going to kick the ground away, and I'm going to use that momentum to fire the hammer up into an overhead position. Now, you notice that second hand is moving along, and that is why. We want to make contact on the striking face, okay, with that opposite hand. The purpose of this is to stop the momentum. If you are new to pressing a BAMF hammer, something you're probably going to notice is the wonky nature of the shape is going to make things a little bit difficult. This hand helps prevent that, okay? It also gives you something to feel the hammer with so you can tell whether or not the hammer is in good position. I don't want you looking up here primarily because it's going to compromise your spine, but secondarily, if you drop it, you've got your face to hit instead of the top of your head, and you're just so pretty, okay? So then what happens is when I'm ready to return the movement, that second hand comes off. I drop the hammer under control. Notice we're dealing with a counter rotation here. So actually, let's go back. Let's take a look. I've got the handle, boom, is out there. As the hammer returns to my body, that handle is going to come here, okay? So maybe a better way to look at this is if I'm dealing with a 45-degree angle across my body at the start, I'm going to be dealing with a 45-degree angle up and away from my body on the top of the movement. That helps you know that you've screwed your shoulder in properly into the rib cage. See, there we go. All right. If that's not there, your press is wonky and we need to fix it. I would encourage you to throw some reps on video early on just to double check that we're doing things correctly, and then let the habits be formed with good movement as opposed to bad movement. Something else I'm looking for in this upper position is I want to get my bicep as close to my ear as possible. And I want to do that without tilting my head. So I want my spine my head to stay stacked on my spine. I want my arm chasing my spinal angle, not my spinal angle chasing my arm. That would compromise the structure here, and we're not doing structural compromise junk yet. Okay, and then when I put it down, rather than pushing it forward, I let it drop across my body so I can put it down on the ground. Okay, we'll take a look at this one from the side. Again, turn the hammer in advance of where you need it to be so it's already there. No sense in making these early things more difficult than they need to be. It's a quick little clean back up. Again, my hand is open. Wrist is in contact with my body just above my hip. There's the dip. So, look at this from the side. Got straight line. And then the dip is going to come. I'm going to break at the hip. Bend the knees forward. Now that's an over-exaggeration. It's not nearly that much. Hey, I was pretty close, actually. Heels stay down on the ground. And then I'm going to kick that ground away. And as my upper body fires, I'm going to take that momentum and fire it up into the hammer. Okay? Now, just for a second, ignore this right elbow because trusting your surgeons is important, and I shouldn't have trusted mine. But what we're looking for now is an extension. Let's Student blue. An extension of the same line I created with my spine. There. Looking to be stacked up. Okay? So, stomach, keep it tucked in. Glutes, rotated underneath. Got it? Let's keep this moving. Forgive the background sound. Oh gosh, that annoys me so much. I'm going to progress this along myself so you don't have to hear that. Okay, trying to keep the hammer nice and close to the body. Don't hit yourself in the face. Huzzah. The next movement we're going to look at is a 2-to-2 press with a focus on the negative. So start with two hands, end with two hands in the top position, but you'll see what I do here. So I'm going to clean hammer up, again, get a good grip. I will dip and drive, add my second hand. Okay, so I've reestablished my position. You know you've got your good 45-degree angle there, but then I'm going to take my secondary hand off, force my pressing hand to stabilize, and then return to the body under control. And I do that on a 2-3 count. In the beginning, taking even as much as a 5 count on the way down is useful because we're focusing on the eccentric load of that. If you're not familiar with what eccentric load is, just do what I tell you to and maybe look up eccentric and concentric loading on the internet. But long story short, I'm right, and you should be doing it if you are seeking to improve your overall strength capacity. This is a great movement to use if you're increasing the load of a hammer in a press. So if you're moving up from 10 kilos, 15 kilos, 12.5 kilos to 20 or 25 kilos, this is a great way to get yourself up there because you probably have the ability to stabilize, but then just focusing on the negative will help grow that muscle, which is what we're looking to do. Let's press some hammers. What do you say? So we're going to look at two different press variations here. The first is going to be a 2-to-1 press. The second is going to be a 2-to-2 press with a negative, focusing on the eccentric section of the movement. So bringing the hammer back down to the body. In terms of difficulty, the second movement we look at is going to be the earlier progression than the first movement we look at because I filmed them in the wrong order. Here we go. So I'm going to clean the hammer up to my body. All right, taking a grip where the head is not resting on my hand. Okay, so challenging the grip as much as possible. You see me reset because I don't want the head to be touching my hand there. You'll be able to tell if you've got an issue with that because you'll get a nice rub mark, a blister on the knuckle of your thumb, that first knuckle of your thumb. So I'm going to take a two-handed ready press position. All right, my forearm is touching my rib cage in this position. My hand is open in hopes of giving myself a shelf rather than doing too much help. I'm going to break at the knee, drop about 4 inches, so I've got a little bit of kick through the ground. Kick the ground away. I'm going to use that momentum to extend my arm. Notice my right hand that was in support position is getting out of the way, moving to the chest, and I'm stacking through. Now, I have some CrossFit coaching experience, so you'll notice my default position is one where the rep doesn't count unless you can see the ear in front of the bicep. Now, I don't know if that's still, part of their thing, but when I was coaching, that was important. Okay, so from here, again, I've got one hand on top. I didn't use my second hand to catch and stabilize, and I'm going to come back under control, put the hammer back in that secondary support hand. Okay, so taking a look. All right, now from this position, this is a little bit easier to see. I've got 45 degrees on the handle, and then as we go up, we're going to reestablish that 45 degrees, but now it's pointed in the opposite direction. All right, so think about it like this. When you're pressing the pommel, okay, the little ball on the end of your handle, that is directional arrow. If it is pointing away from your body on top, that's good. If it's pointing across your body in the bottom, that is good. All right. Also, we're going to try and get the bicep as close to the ear as possible without leaning your head into the rep. Okay, so I want to get stacked up nice and tall. This might be a mobility issue for some of you. It's really common, especially if you've done more bodybuilding than more functional, unconventional type stuff. It's been my experience coaching athletes that there can be some bound up stuff in that shoulder joint, especially if we treat the shoulder like a hinge rather than as mobile as it actually is. So that's that 2-to-1 press. So I'm using two hands so I can generate the push press, but I'm making my pressing hand do all the stabilization in the top of the position. All right, we're going to take a look at several of the press variations that you should see showing up in the programming for the first 12 weeks. A series of progressions and regressions here. Primarily, the regressions that we're going to, or the progressions that we're going to need to deal with are based on skill rather than anything else. And a lot of that skill has to do with finding the right position in the bottom of the press and then in the top of the press. So what we're going to do, I'm going to clean this weight up. We're going to start with a two-handed or a 2-and-2 push press, 2-and-2 push press. So 2 hands on the hammer in the bottom position, 2 hands on the hammer in the top position. Okay, so I'm going to find my feet under my shoulders, little dip, and then violently kick the ground away. That kick helps me get into this press position. Then the second hand follows. I establish the 45-degree angle with the handle on top. Add my second hand to help establish that position, because as you're getting used to this, holding this position is more than likely where we're going to run into some difficulty. Then that second hand comes off, 180 degrees rotation with the hammer, and we are back in contact. In the bottom position, my wrist is attached to my rib cage to form a nice little shelf. Then I drive up, doing the best that I can not to press the hammer with 2 hands. I'm trying to have the all of the load taken with the pressing hand. That second hand is just kind of along for the ride, adding itself to the hammer. And this is also going to allow you to feel this position. That second hand is going to give you a bit of a feedback loop, and then returning back down, right? That's going to be the place where most of us start with that press. Next up, we're going to see a different variation again, starting with 2 hands. I'm going to go up to a 2-handed position. This is a 2-and-2 push press with a focus on the negative, or the eccentric load of the movement. So you'll notice my hand is going to come off. I'm maintaining that hold position, that overhead position. Then I will pull the hammer back into my body. Okay. Maintaining control on the way down. Notice that offhand is way out, so I'm not tempted. Then I'll come back. I'll reestablish the position, dip and drive. Hand comes off and return. Easy piece. Okay. Next press we are going to take a look at. Again, starting with the 2-handed position, 1 hand on top. So if you take a look at this position, it should be the same hammer position in the overhead as it is with the 2-and-2 press, but we've used that 2-and-2 press to help establish good position here, so that that's the position that I find when I'm doing a 2-to-1 press. We need to make sure that we're up there under control, because if we lose that 45-degree angle, what's going to happen is the head is going to tilt down towards your noggin, and it's really difficult to reestablish that good position once you've lost that 45-degree angle. I was speaking with an athlete on the morning of this recording, talking about how it's much easier to keep the pinky finger pulled down to the elbow on the way up. It's easier to maintain that position through the press than it is to recultivate it after you've lost it. So that's a 2-to-1 press, 2-to-1 push press. Okay, now we're going to do a 1-to-1 push press. Again, same dip and drive, but not adding the support hand on the bottom, not adding the support hand on the top. So a lot more attention has to be paid to the path that the hammer takes, which we should be wanting to do if we're trying to get better with this stuff, which they say you are. And finally, we're going to do a 1-to-1 strict press. So we're just going to take that dip and drive out of the equation. I like to do this little thingy with my hand. This is not compulsory. It's just something I do. But with this offhand, I will envision grabbing onto something for a little bit of stability. I don't know why that helps me, but it does. Okay. It's not incredibly important. You don't have to do it. but it helps me. Up it goes, and then return. Okay, up and then back down. Okay, so those are the press variations that you'll see over the course of this 12-week program.
So yeah, there we go. Lots of different press variations. Now here's the thing about the press. This is the movement that I most often find athletes saying, I tried the press, it's really uncomfortable, the hammer's really heavy, the hammer's too heavy, I need to make an exchange or I need to do something different. Now here's the thing. The step between the hammer is really heavy and the hammer is too heavy, that's an important step, all right? If you stepped into the gym and automatically started, you said, I've been on the couch for 25 years and I want to do handstand push-ups. If a coach puts you on top of on your hands and asks you to do work, that's not advisable because you can't cut your legs off so that you weigh less, all right? Hammer training is kind of similar, but if we're intelligent and intentional about sticking to a program, we are going to build the strength in those motor patterns. So if you can really messily get a 2-to-2 press 3 times with the weight that you want to use, I can build you over the course of 12 weeks to the point where you're doing 15 or 20 strict presses with that hammer. You just have to stick to the program, okay? You're not going to be able to deviate, and you're not going to be able to deviate, and it might take longer than 12 weeks. It might take 15, it might take 20. The question is, what are you willing to put on the line right now and say, I want that? If that's you, if you want to be pushed that way, if you say to yourself, you know what, I feel like I can rise to the challenge of that type of motivation, don't give up on yourself. Engage with the 12-week program that we're going to be hosting Ensemble and give yourself the challenge. Set yourself a high goal and then go after it. That's not necessarily for everybody. And if you're adding BAMF hammer to your physiological training routine because you want to get better at this little piece of mobility because you want to be doing CrossFit or you want to do Spartan race or whatever, if you're not trying to get better with this individual piece of equipment for its own sake, that's fine. Let's get you a hammer that you can use. But for some of you watching, you need to hear me say that you can do this. You just have to do it intelligently, and you're probably not going to be able to do it the way that you've done things like this in the past. If you think that's you, reach out to us and let's take care of you. Happy hammering.